On January the 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler assumed power as Chancellor of the Third Reich. He presided over a cabinet in which Nazi ministers were still in a minority. On February the 27th, the Reichstag building, which housed the German parliament, went up in flames. There was a strong suspicion that the Nazis started the fire themselves. Hitler immediately seized the opportunity to outlaw all opposition to his regime. Communists, socialists, trade unionists, and Jews, who were political opponents, were sent to the first concentration camp, Dachau, only 12 miles from Munich. No pity was to be shown here to enemies of the state. Dachau, with its chilling motto, "Tolerance is a sign of weakness," would become a model for the infamous German concentration camp system. In the spring of 1933, the Nazis brutally clamped down on art and culture. The books of world-famous authors like Freud, Einstein, Thomas Mann, and H.G. Wells were thrown on the flames. These book-burning ceremonies were enthusiastically led by university students all over Germany. The Minister of Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels, organized the burning of books in Berlin. He boasted that from now on Germany would be forever freed from the influence of Jewish ideas.
Das Zeitalter eines überspitzten jüdischen Intellektualismus ist nun zu Ende.
Joseph Goebbels, after Hitler, was the Nazi Party's most dynamic speaker.
Die Furcht vor dem Tode zu verlernen.
Goebbels was a skillful organizer who mastered and developed the art of propaganda. It was he who created the image of Hitler as Germany's Superman. He controlled every aspect of the German media, including press, radio, film, theater, and books. By the end of 1934, Goebbels had removed thousands of Jewish artists, academics, and writers from their positions. Since seizing power, the Nazis had also begun a drive to exclude Jews from Germany's economic life. There was a boycott of Jewish shops and businesses. Everywhere posters were put up saying, "Don't buy from Jews." Stormtroopers drove through the streets, shouting anti-Semitic slogans and threatening customers who wished to enter Jewish shops. Professional people were the next in line. By 1935, 70% of all Jewish lawyers and 50% of Jewish doctors had been removed from their positions. Later that year, at the Nuremberg Party rally, Hitler was to claim that those who had laughed at him when he came to power were no longer laughing.
Am 30. Januar sind in Deutschland die Würfel gefallen. Und ich glaube nicht, dass die Gegner, die damals noch gelacht haben, heute auch noch lachen.
Even before the Olympics, the Third Reich had passed a series of anti-Jewish race laws. We see here Hermann Goering, Hitler's second-in-command, announcing to the Nazi Party in Nuremberg that Jews are to be stripped of their civil and political rights. They were no longer to be citizens of the Third Reich. Marriages and any sexual relations between Jews and people of so-called German blood were strictly forbidden and became criminal offenses. These racist laws aimed at the complete separation of the Jews from German society. Adolf Hitler ominously warned that if the Nuremberg laws failed to achieve this goal, a more extreme final solution would have to be found by the Nazi Party. Meanwhile, all over Germany, in streets and public places, Nazi posters branded Jews as threatening devils. The poster we see here is advertising a special edition of the viciously anti-Semitic newspaper Der Stürmer. It reads, "Jewishness is criminal." In the classrooms of the Third Reich, children's books drove home a hateful message that Jews were like poisonous mushrooms. Pupils were taught how to recognize the Jew as a terrible danger to German women and children. Signs like these across Germany proclaimed in bold letters, "Jews are not wanted here." This pressure pushed many Jews to seek refuge elsewhere, but all over Europe the doors were closing fast. Even the United States, which had accepted 2 million Jews before the First World War, would only allow a tiny number to enter in the 1930s. The American government and public made it plain that they had no intention of increasing numbers of Jewish immigrants. Nevertheless, the American President Franklin Roosevelt felt obliged to hold an international conference at Evian in France in 1938. Virtually all 32 countries represented, including the United Kingdom and the whole of the British Empire, declined to take any more Jewish refugees. One observer at the conference was Golda Meir, who was later to become the Prime Minister of Israel. She noted at the time, "I felt a mixture of sorrow, rage, frustration, and horror." The tragic plight of European Jewry was underlined by the fate of the ocean liner St. Louis, a ship that set sail in May 1939 from Hamburg. It was carrying 900 German Jewish refugees bound for the New World. The ship was denied entry to Cuba and the USA and had to return to Europe. At the last moment, the passengers were allowed to land in France, Belgium, Britain, and Holland. Most ended up as victims of the Holocaust, except those few who were given refuge in England. By 1938, Hitler was energetically building up the German military machine. The whole country had been transformed into one giant marching column. Hitler succeeded in binding an entire generation of German youth to the cause of National Socialism. In Vienna, Jews were publicly humiliated, made to scrub the pavements in front of jeering spectators and former neighbors. A violent and brutal campaign of intimidation forced thousands of Jews to leave Austria. The man put in charge of these expulsions was Adolf Eichmann, later to be very closely involved in the mass murder of Jews in all Nazi-occupied Europe. In Germany, too, the pressure on Jews was becoming unbearable. Jewish businesses were taken over by so-called Aryans, that is, non-Jewish Germans. The fabric of Jewish existence was literally being smashed. Then, on the night of November the 9th, 1938, the worst anti-Jewish violence in Germany's history exploded. This was to be called Kristallnacht, Night of the Broken Glass. Across the country, about 400 synagogues went up in flames. Over 700 shops and businesses were looted and ransacked. Nearly 100 Jews were killed, and 30,000 more were sent to concentration camps. After this orgy of destruction, a huge fine was imposed upon the German Jewish community. The Jews were forced to clear up and pay for the damage which the Nazis themselves had caused. During these horrifying events, there were scarcely any public protests from the German population at what was happening before their very eyes. By 1939, the remaining Jews of Germany were totally isolated. A stream of humiliating decrees forbade them from using public parks, benches, swimming pools, or visiting theaters, concerts and exhibitions, or even owning a dog. In a speech to the Reichstag on January the 30th, 1939, Adolf Hitler ominously threatened the Jews with destruction in the event of a Second World War.
Ich will heute wieder ein Prophet sein.
He said, if the international Jewish financiers in and outside Europe should succeed in plunging the nations once more into a world war, then the result will not be the Bolshevization of the earth, and thus the victory of Jewry, but the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe.
Die Vernichtung der jüdischen Rasse in Europa.